Hello, and welcome to the second episode of Black Crow Gaming's uh, World Eater Tactics videos, the Conquerors Nails. Um, this is I'm Sam. I'm Black Crow Gaming's World Eater specialist. I live and breathe World Eaters. I go to lots of events for World Eaters, and I'm making this video series to sort of share my knowledge with everyone that's interested, that wants to learn more about, melee-focused armies or World Eaters specifically. This episode is going to focus on the charge phase and a bit of the fight phase and how to get the most out of your charges. Um, how to maximize your chances of making charges and how to maximize your damage when you do. So generally, I think a lot of people have a general gist of how the charge phase works, but there are some nice little tips and tricks that I think I could add in and things to watch out for that, like, it's very hard to screen things perfectly, for example. We're starting here on screening, and if um, the opponent doesn't screen things perfectly, then there's a lot of ways we can take advantage. So yeah, like basically how to recognize when somebody is doing something not quite perfectly for their favor, and how to exploit it. So I'm going to run through I've got some slides to sort of show like layouts of positions. But so the first one's this, right? This is a very standard looking screen. I mean, in 9th edition, this was a perfectly acceptable screen. In 10th edition, one of the major rule changes for the charge and fight phase was the fact that you don't have to fight the unit you charge now, or the units that you charge. You can actually fight something that you didn't charge at all, even though you charged. So that's a huge difference. So for this situation, you see that they've bubble wrapped their unit A with unit B, and obviously they want to keep unit A safe, and unit B is expendable, right? Probably like a unit of cultists or something, something that they're protecting, right? Like, it doesn't matter what each unit is. Point is, you want to kill unit A and unit B, not just be stuck on unit B and then be exposed to be shot and killed in the turn after. So let's say like unit 1 and 2 are like 8-bound, for example, for World Eaters, but they could literally be any deadly combat unit in the game. And the point is you charge both of them in to the one unit. The first unit kills unit B, uh, and then the second unit can pile in. So assuming that they've not pushed things out far enough, but there is obviously some risks with this one. I mean, this is a very basic example. You've got to make sure that obviously you hit the right charges and get the right distance, and that you can place the models where you want to place them, and they're within 3 inches of that second unit when you've made the charge. But also, if your first unit doesn't kill that front unit, your second unit's going to be blocked, because they're going to leave those models there, because they're going to want to stop you from doing exactly this, which is piling in. So, you know, that one's basic. Most people nowadays know, oh, I can't just bubble wrap directly around my unit. I'm going to have to spread out. So they usually quite often will like push forward, and they'll spread out and like chain their bodies really long. Like, this isn't a perfect example, because obviously this unit in the front isn't technically in coherency, because they need to have every model within 2, and those ones on the end are not within 2. But just assume the unit continues, or they're in coherency. The point is that they've pushed out, right? They're at 3 inches away, so you can't just hit that front unit and pile through. But because they've spread out, they've left 2-inch gap between each thing, which is fine. That's a legal thing to do, but it does expose things for us to be able to charge through the gaps, because once you're in the charge phase, you can go within 1 inch of your opponent. So you just charge through the holes. So you always want to be looking out for those, like, especially for things like 8-bound, 40 millimeter holes between models when they're screening you, because if you can squeeze your model to the other side of the unit, suddenly that 3 inches is not long enough. So you can charge in like that, you get through, and set yourself up for that shorter distance just to pile on through. So that first unit once again kills unit B, and then unit 2 can pile in and kill things. I mean, once again, if you don't kill that first unit with the first activation, you're in a bit of trouble. That second unit's going to be stuck. But it does. You can mitigate that by making a long. If you declare a multi-charge into both units, you can potentially sort of charge like this, and that way you've got at least two models that will be able to strike unit A in this situation. But you do require that longer charge because you need to make the distance to go between A and B. So, um, this once again, like this is another mistake that has to be made on the defending player, right? Like this is not about like, oh, we can no matter what we can exploit something, but they have to play perfectly to not give you options to exploit. So, um, these are some examples which I've had in games, right? Like where the person's not screened far enough forward or has left these big gaps where you can run through. There's even situations where you can run around the edge of units. So you want to be looking out for any way that you can sort of leapfrog from that front screening unit into the back unit. Here, they've made those gaps slightly smaller, so no 40 mil base is going to fit through. We don't have fly in this case if it's ain't bound, so we're stuck, and so there's not really anything we can do here, right? Like these two units, there's we're out of that pile in range. We can't get through the unit on the charge, so we're kind of stuck. So this is the correct way to screen, but it does have still some limitations. They still have to be careful not to push it too far, because so this is I went through there. Just you're not going to get within that 4 inches because it is 4 inches. You got 3 inch move to get within that 1 inch. So as long as that's all greater than 4, we're stuck, and they've screened properly, right? But if they screen slightly too far, so a model like Angron can hop over. So this is where you have to multi-charge and declare on both. And if there's less than 6 inches between two models, but more than 4 inches, you can place Angron there. But you have to declare on both units if it's less than 6. But yeah, this is the way. All right, I suppose you could do 5 and a bit. You could just base the front unit or whatever. But the oh no, you have to still charge both. We're thinking about too many things. But um, yeah, basically you're in a situation where like I've had this before as well where they've like tried to screen out my stuff and then I've just charged Angron over the top and into the sort of back of the unit, and then he's piled forward into the unit afterwards after unit 1 kills B again. But this can be quite easily fixed. You put in a few little stragglers back, it's not just a single line wall, and suddenly now Angron can't fit through. This could be done with any jump, any fly model. So if you've got, if this going outside of world eaters for a second, if you've got units that like jump infantry, like the new Sangria Guard, or because they're probably going to be quite good in combat and quite good at doing this particular trick. But Death Company, jump intercessors, whatever the jump stuff is that's combatty. They're much harder to screen because they can hop to that second side of that unit and get that further distance towards the enemy's the unit that they're trying to hide or screen. But yeah, so that's like a very quick overview of screening. It's not an easy thing to get right, making sure that the opponent does it right. And sometimes opponents might just go like, oh, I've screened this, right, we're good. And you're like, well, let's see if that's possible. You've got to make sure when people do, because we play by intention. Playing by intention is all fine as long as what you intend is possible, right? So you've got to watch out for these things of like, oh, if you want to be here and screening this thing and stood on this objective like this, then I'm going to have this gap to be able to do this mechanic. Is that what you're, is that okay with the way that you want to move that? Or do you want to move and do something slightly differently and block out that thing, but then you're exposing this other thing? And that can quite often happen where people like move stuff and they're like, I've screened you completely. And then you go, well, I can get in between here and I can go around. So knowing all of the little tips and tricks is quite useful. There's a lot of ways now that the way like the charge phase works, where you charge into stuff and then get to pile into whatever there is there. It sets up a lot of opportunities. Um, Another opportunity is transports. So once again, in ninth edition, because you had to fight the stuff you charged, you couldn't kill stuff after it came out of a transport in the fight phase, which is a big limitation to melee armies like world eaters. You now can, but it requires a bit of finesse. So you need at least 2 units into the opposing transport. Um, this is obviously not the most perfect scale. I didn't measure out how these represent. So take all of this with a pinch of salt. But the principles are the same. So you're charging 2 units in. Now sometimes you might charge 3 or whatever, but whatever you want to do, you don't want to block out where the opponent can go. So the charge rules are very simple. You have to base if you can base. So when we're talking about, you might potentially roll high and have to base loads of models, or you roll low and then you actually don't get to base very many, and you leave too much of a gap. So it's a bit of finesse, and it takes a bit of practice. And I recommend literally just getting models out on a table and going through this, and roll a couple of dice to see your charges, and then see how you would plan it out. One of the best things you can do is, because of the nature of pre-measuring, if your opponent has like however many models in this transport, while you're doing your charges, you could ask them, politely, to use the models, or if you have the same models at the same basis, you could also use them, and just sort of place them around and figure out how they could possibly get out of the vehicle, and plan out where you want them to come out when you kill the vehicle. So um, this first example, I charge them with unit 1 and unit 2. So 1 spreads out to make a surface area. Unit 2 didn't roll particularly high. So there's something interesting with this setup. I probably, like, let's say I could have moved some of those unit 2 models closer. I don't want to move them closer. I want to have a spread, because I don't want to force myself into a bad position. So having a nice spread means that I can sort of like wingle my models around, so I have like less in base than are necessary, so I can have more free movement with where I put my models. So let's say I charge like this. So I've had a decent number on the charge, but not too high. But I've spread, because of that, I've like spread out my models, so there's no space to put extra models. So those 2 ones that aren't in base couldn't get into base, even though they had the distance to reach the transport in that area. I've blocked them out, so they physically can't. So then they can go up to the top, so I can have like a weighted area at the top of the transport, so that when the unit gets killed and forced out, I have more models that are close to them. Because as you see, like the ones at the bottom of the unit are not going to be able to get into engagement range. But if I didn't leave a gap there, maybe the opponent would fit. So this is the balancing act that you need to do, and why I think it's really good idea to just like ask the opponent to get out of the models and be like, all right, where can you fit this unit, and how do I want to try and block it? Because potentially I could have squeezed my unit. If they needed more space, I could squeeze my unit further down, and make it harder for them to fit, to give them more space. With my first unit that charged, I could have been more compact, because there was no way that one of my unit 2 would have made it round to that side of the transport. So there's a lot of nuance to making sure that the opponent can get out normally, and are forced into a position where you can attack them, right? Because the important part about this is, if the opponent can't get their entire unit out within 3 inches and outside of 1 inch of you, they then get 6 inches. Which, when they get 6 inches, they can just come out on the other side of unit 1, and unit 1's the one that you've used to kill the transport. So then you're just not. They just get so much more distance. They can just yeet themselves away, and yes, they take more damage from the transport dying, but it's not the same as getting hit by your second unit, because your second unit is probably deadly and going to kill a lot of them, if not all of them, before they get to go. Especially if it's, if we go to like what we expect, like plague marines. So quite often I've killed plague marines getting out of rhino, and they were fight first units. Like, well, that was in the rhino. They didn't get to fight first because they weren't in engagement range when the combat started, because I get to then activate and move into them. They were in the transport. Um, so it is sort of one of these key moments of like, um, when I see my opponents moving transports towards me full of stuff, it's like oh yeah, give me that. Like I'm gonna get to kill that transport and the unit inside, and it can be quite a powerful move. But it can be messed up, right? It is doable where you don't get it outright or you don't kill the transport. That's the other worry. If you don't kill the transport, once again, it's the same problem as before, where you don't kill that screening unit. You just sat there and you just have to hit it with the second unit. And yeah, you'll kill the transport, but now you've spent 2 units to expose 2 units onto the battlefield to kill just a transport, which is not ever where we want to be, with such a like an elite army as world eaters, where you know every unit you have is valuable, and has to sort of do something in the game. Otherwise, you're going to be struggling. Um, so yeah, so when the transport dies, they can just pile in the 3 inches, and I've managed to get 4 models into engagement here, quite comfortably. And so there is situations where it's like, okay, well, if I rolled a higher charge and all of them had to base, because otherwise no matter what, no matter how I set them up, they're all going to get into base. Well, you just compact them all together. So you sort of, if I've happened to roll like a double six, I can compact my models together. And especially if this happens with the first roll of the charge, you sort of you want to do the riskier charge first, because then your second charge can sort of make up for it and spread, and like with that unit one, I could choose to not be as spread out. But in this example, let's say I charge for unit one first, I've had to like compact my unit as much as possible to sort of not expose like not close that area that they can set up in. So they're set up again, and once again I've got 3 or 4 in. I think it was 4 this time. You can see the 4 that come across. I mean, one of them isn't getting, it's that using your bases to make other ones reach because they're in base-to-base contact, which is pretty nice. So you want to be trying to pre-measure this, and it is finicky. Does take a bit of getting used to, but I highly recommend getting used to this part of the game, because it's such a good. It can win games, literally. Like if the opponent's not ready for it, it can win games. I had a game 3 of a big tournament where my opponent, I was contesting a couple of objectives with some spawn and things like that, like a couple of OC over here and there, and they went, "Oh, I don't really want to commit, so let me just throw my transports on and just contest the objectives or take them off you with my 2 OC transports." But he left his units in the transport, which just meant, oh, I went, okay, here's 2 units of 8 bound, well, 1 unit of exalted, 1 unit of normal, and my 10 berserkers with massive executions into that impulsor, and then 3 8 bound and Angron into the other impulsor, and both of them popped, and then the unit swarmed them, killed them. So it is very much like you've got to sort of plan out the way that you move. But that I took 4 of his units off the board, 2 transports and 2 key units off the board in that one maneuver, because my opponent didn't think through the way I would charge these transports, and thought, oh, he's just going to kill the transports and expose himself, and it lets me then have the initiative. And it's like, well, nope, I have the initiative now because you've given me easy charges onto a transport with stuff in. So yeah, I think it's really a crucial skill to master, because if you just get it right every time, then yeah. And I mean, I've definitely not gotten it right every time. I've had failed 4-inch charges with Angron before into a Rhino and gone, well, now I only have 1 unit into that Rhino, so I'm not killing it. Well, I'm killing the Rhino, but not anything inside. So you got to be careful, but you can't, unless you manage to get 2-inch charges everywhere. There's no guarantees in charges. You just got to try and maximize, which we've got fight first next. So that's a big thing in combat. For combat armies especially, because fight first is very much a defensive rule, right? Like you don't if you have fight first and you charge, you don't beat out the defender's fight first. So the defender will always get to choose a fight first unit. So there's a few ways, because the defender gets to choose to fight with the fight first unit first. It's dangerous charging a fight first unit that's deadly. But we have ways of mitigating the damage or choosing where the damage goes, because we're doing the charging, we can decide where who's in combat with who, and where's base space. And yes, opponents can pile in, but you have to go end closer. So if you're in base to base, you can't pile in. You're as close as you can possibly go. So if I mean, as I'll show here. So if a opponent unit has like a fight first unit, I've put AC for a character in that unit, because usually it's a character that gives that unit fight first, and it's usually a nasty damaging character. There's lots of examples of this in the past. I mean, Massive Executions is one as well. So if we're talking about the mirror match, this is a great example for the mirror match. You do not want to let that Massive Executions get into the unit that you want to keep safe. For this example, it's Angron, because let's be honest, there's nothing more important than throwing Angron into a scary enemy unit and just wiping the floor of it. So I've got Angron and Jackals, and the enemy's got a fight first unit that's just spread out, which is effectively a mistake by the opponent, but there's reasons why they might be spread out. It positionally advantageous or otherwise in different situations. But because of this, we can capitalize on this and charge in the Jackals and Angron, and the Jackals base everyone. Even you don't base everyone or base everyone but one of them, and now all of those, and Angron goes in just bases the one. So just that one can fight Angron, because it's the only one in engagement range of Angron, and none of the rest can move. So yes, they fight first. They will probably wipe through the Jackals, but oh no, my 65-point little screening scoring unit is dead. But I get to attack you with Angron without taking any damage, and this is your big scary fight first unit that I need to remove off the table, otherwise I'm going to be struggling through the game. And so Jackals die, Angron wipes the unit. So there's a way which people play around this. Sorry. Before that, you can do the same with a Rhino as well. It's very similar. You put Angron on the end. The Rhino sneaks in towards it, and they have to go towards the Rhino. So in this case, they can get an extra guy across into Angron. So they'll get two guys attacking into Angron, but the character and the rest of the unit are going to have to hit the Rhino. And once again, I mean, sometimes the units that are really good into stuff won't necessarily kill a Rhino in this situation. It just depends on what the type of unit is that you're scared of that's got this fight first brick. If, for example, like Lilith and Weeches, you know, she's not killing the Rhino. It's all about infantry for them. So this is a really good spot. Although, to be fair, they're not good into Angron either. But you don't want Angron to take all the damage, and so this is the better situation. And you want to use your scoring units, things like Spawn and Rhinos and Jackals, and just throw them in and, as a sacrificial lamb. But they take the hit. It stops your key units like Ain't Bound or whatever. Because you could do this with Ain't Bound as well if you position it right. That you don't end up having to base too many of them if they're spread out, and you can block. You charge with the Jackals first, and you block the positioning, because they're gonna kill the Jackals. So it's fine if the Jackals are like literally directly in front, because then you can pile more through afterwards. I wish I had an example of that, but I don't have that one in. But I have a similar example. But like if the opponent plays to their best advantage of that, because what we're playing on here is the fact that they can't move once you base them, and you can only attack models that you're in within an inch of, or you're in base with a friend that's also in base with them, like the two next to Angron at the top there. So if we do, so if they set up in a ball, right? So they set themselves up, and now if Angron bases any one of them, at least 4 out of the what is it, 7 models will be able to attack him, including the character. No matter what, that character can attack him, no matter which one he charges, and whatever happens, Angron can get hit by the majority of the unit. So this is intimidating. This is not an easy charge to do, but there is a trick. So once again, Jackals are the best thing for this. You can't really do this with a Rhino, because the whole point here is we stop Angron from getting into base to base. So to successfully charge, you need to get within an inch of the opponent, and if you can go into base to base, you have to go into base to base. But if we charge with the jackals first, we can set up a ring where Angron won't fit. Obviously, in this case, if Angron got rolled like a 12 or something, he might be able to hop over to the other side, but you'd have to clear his entire base over there. And you want to sort of set yourself up where it's not likely that Angron's going to fail the charge. But yeah, so you basically make this spot where, oh, with most of the dice rolls that I'm going to all right, my headset decided to turn itself off there. Um, so yeah, if you have the jackals separating, like you leave a gap, right? Because they've got a 2-inch coherency. You leave a gap where Angron can't physically fit his whole base in to go into base to base combat, but can get within an inch. So he then goes with an inch of that front one. That is the only one that is now within an inch of Angron, or within an inch, like within base to base of somebody that's in base to base, because no one's in base to base with Angron. So now, once again, only one can attack Angron. And so this is a trick you can do again. Say if you had 6 Exalted Ain't Bound here, you put one into that spot, and the rest are just stuck around behind jackals, and then they attack and kill a load of the jackals. And now you're like, oh great, okay, I'm gonna pile in past the jackals now and kill your unit. So you want to sort of, you can force, even though they get to strike first, you can force where their attacks go. And that's a few little neat tricks that you can do, assuming positioning is, obviously it's not easy to do. These are like the perfect examples where I've not had to roll particularly high on charges because I've put myself right in front. But we are a very fast army. You want to be trying not to like go for these long ball charges. If you find yourself feeling like you have to go for an 8 or a 9, especially if it's more than one of those. Like if you've got one of those and it's not that important, if you fail it, that's okay. But if you're relying on those sort of charges, you're just not going to be consistent in the game. So you're not gonna necessarily be winning many games that way. It's all about sort of maximizing your chances. Remember that Angron can use that +1 to charge. The reroll hits is amazing. Don't get me wrong, I want that every turn. But there is times where I'm like, I don't necessarily need the reroll hits to kill what I'm going into, but I really do need to make the charge, right? So I might even use it in a case where it's like, oh, it's like a 6-inch charge. I'll give myself +1 charge just to make sure, because I know that I don't need his maybe there's nothing else in the aura and it's just Angron and it's into a vehicle or something that's just going to pop it easily. There's just, the point is you want to make sure you don't do any damage if you don't make the charge. So you want to be maximizing that, saving a CP for that reroll, for that key charge. Remember to charge in the right order, so you know that you've gotten the key ones successfully first, and then the risky ones that you're like not sure about, and you might want to spend this, you might more like spend the CP on later. So you know that you've secured all of your important charges first, and then can go on to the the riskier ones. So speaking of maximizing charges, there's a technique called, well, I call it leapfrogging. I don't know if anyone's got like an official name for it other than that, but I think leapfrogging is appropriate. Once again, you can, going back to the screening things, you can go into and transport. You can fight stuff you've not charged, which means if there's a unit closer that you can charge that you're already going to kill with something else, you can charge it, and make your distance shorter. So in this example, we've got 2 enemy units. We can make a charge from 1 to A. That's not that difficult charge. We might want to multi-charge it anyway because of B is slightly in the way for some of our models, and it would just make placing the models maybe easier. But it doesn't really change the charge distance. Um, but our unit 2 is planning on killing unit B anyway. So when we do this, we can charge both units into unit B, which gives us effectively like 3 inches further of movement when we talk about the charge itself. It means it's much more likely that we make the charge. We could be changing a 7-inch charge into a 4-inch charge, and say that's just like 5 Space Marines that are getting killed by Exalted Ape Man, they're gonna die. Like Exalted Ape Man gonna shred through them, or it could be like, 5 Warp Spiders or whatever, right? Like um, we've got this positional thing, and there is tricks that opponents can use. I mean, there's a Space Marine detachment that like lets you move when you get charged. So in this example, they might have tried to save A with a stratagem and go, oh, you had like a 7-inch charge. I'm gonna move D6. Oh, suddenly it's an 11-inch charge now, and suddenly you're not making that charge and you fail the charge. But because you've already charged B, they can't use that strat. Now they might just use it straight on B, but then you've got a 7-inch charge into A. So it makes it much less worth it for them. But once they've been charged, they can't use that strat on something that's already in engagement range. So this is another way of mitigating around stratagems and things like that. You need to make sure that you are aware of all the tricks that opponents can do. There might be a case where there's a rule for, I think it's the repulsor, where a unit can get back in the vehicle. If you can just charge the units next to it, they can't get back in the vehicle because you've not actually triggered that like the rule to start. But you kill that front unit, piling in normally, like and once again, it's got the same issues. If you don't kill that front unit, you're stuck killing that front unit. Okay, so this is another one where, and like this is probably the least exaggerated version of this. But you have 3 units in front of you. One of those units is like a single model, maybe like a spawn model, or maybe it's the corner of a tank sticking out at the front or something. There's something there that's not too big, not too much space to base it. But your charge, if I want to charge all 3 units here. I can't. Well, if I want to charge all 3 units, let's say it's like a 7-inch charge comparative to a 6-inch charge of charging just C, right? So I will declare on just C, and this is a rare situation, but it's just a really good like situation to highlight, like something to think about, like when you want to think about how many models can base a unit. Because if your model can't base a unit, you can effectively move it freely. So you actually get quite a lot of free movement. You have to end closer to a target. So um, you basically can move almost like parallel to the unit that you've actually charged with the stuff that can't base, as long as you stay in coherency range. So if I charge just C, I can put 2 models into base to base with C. Let's say that's what my intention was anyway, but it's not the end of the world if it isn't. If I want those other models to fight other units, and then I'm actually, this is quite conservative. I'm still quite grouped up. I could be a bit more spread out. I could have 2 inches between each of these models, but then uh, I've charged, assuming there's no fight first. They don't heroic intervene or anything like that. Which, if you were planning on charging them anyway, them heroicing doesn't change anything. It just makes them spend a CP to do it. It also means that none of if I fight somewhere else on the map, um, and then they want to interrupt with, say, Unit A, they can't interrupt with Unit A because they're not in combat. So that also stops like somebody doing that. Other than C, you're going to get to fight first over here. So this is another way around fights first, where you can hit a unit nearby and then pile into it. With the leapfrogging technique. But here, so I can pile in, and once again, like you see, I've actually, even though I had to base 2 into C, I've based A with number 2, and also based number 3 with number 2, which now means number 3, even though it's in base to base with C, can still hit Unit A. So I can put three models on Unit A, 2 models on Unit B, and 1 on Unit C, or mix that up in different ways. I could put 2, 3, 4, and 5 into C and put 1 on B and 1 on A. Say if I didn't want to kill those units, I just wanted to hurt them a little bit and then tag them to say these were exalted ain't bound, to then have reroll, to make them have 2 attempts to fail falling back, to mean that they can't shoot my exalted ain't bound. So that's another thing you want to think about, is like how you spread the unit to try and tag enemy like squishy non-combat units, to then try and hold them up in combat with the exalted ain't bound rule. So there's a lot of different tricks with that as well. So it's always something to consider. Like okay, I can fit 3 models into base here at best, and that's assuming I roll a charge above a certain number. Um, what can I, I don't necessarily need to do that multi-charge then, because I will just have to sit an inch away from them, and that's fine. Um, or, oh, they've got a fight first unit there, but they've got this vehicle next to it. Let me just throw 3 units into the vehicle, and then 2 of them can hop across to attack the fight first unit, or something like that. I don't know. Well, bear in mind that once you've hit the fight first unit the first time, if there's anything left, it will be able to fight then. But yes, uh, I think that's all of them. Yep. So that's all of the. That's a whistle stop tour through all of these little charging tricks. It's not necessarily a everything, right? So if you have any, and it doesn't cover every possible scenario. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop me a comment, and I'll happily answer them. Um, if you found any of this video helpful, if you're still here at the end, I mean, thank you for watching through the whole video. And please give the video a like, and check out some of our other videos on Black Crow Gaming. We do a lot of different tactics videos now, and we've got podcasts. So please go, and battle reports. Please go and check it out. Give us a subscribe. But yeah, I think that's everything for me. I'll be bringing out more tactics videos. If there's anything you want to see, or you think like you're most interested in, whether it be like deployment, movement phase. My previous video, episode 1, if you haven't checked it out, I talked through all of the data sheets and a bit about how I use each one, and what my opinions are of it. So please go check that out if you've not seen it. But yeah, I think that's everything for this video. So yeah, please give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.